Hello, everybody, and welcome back, or should I say, welcome to the inaugural Rocky Top Insider Press Pass Baseball Podcast in the year of 2025. It's Monday, February 3rd. I'm your host, Jack Foster, joined alongside my guy, Ryan Schumpert. We'll be with you every step of the way throughout the 2025 Tennessee baseball season, doing our own little podcast separate from the flagship show, the regular Press Pass, if you will, that's more focused on basketball and football. But I love this podcast. It's my favorite thing I do at Rocky Top Insider. This is probably my favorite episode we'll do all season, a comprehensive season preview. It's a long one, ladies and gentlemen, so buckle up. But before we get into it, Ryan, how you doing on this fabulous Monday?
Doing well. Excited to be back. This is, like you said, a great way to start the week. Though it was supposed to be the first thing I did work-wise this week, and then the Mike Eckler news broke that he was going back to Nebraska. So like a little bit of a worse way work-wise to start the week. But excited to be on here. And like you said, yeah, it'll be a long one. So probably got you covered for your drive to work, your drive back to work, and back from work, and then your drive to work and drive back from work the next day. So we got plenty of yeah, we'll have plenty of good content here, and excited to get into it. For what is it like? We'll get into a very new Tennessee baseball team, but a team that there's once again plenty of reason for excitement around.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of 2023 with just how many departures there were all across the roster, and it's just pretty much a brand new team. Quite a few key transfers we'll get into, tons of freshmen who could contribute, some JUCO guys mixed in. So it's a lot of new to take into account, and some guys who have been in the program who will see expanded roles in 25. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Year 8 of the Tony Vitello era on tap. As I mentioned, it's a lot to it's a lot to replenish this season. But I think, as we'll find throughout this pod, they did a good job. And hey, the coaching staff is back as well. The Texas A&M drama with Josh Eanlander ended up being nothing. He stays, of course. Frank's back. Q's back. Got some really key pieces that made up this national championship winning coaching staff. And Hunter Inslee, a team leader and a great locker room guy who returned to Tennessee baseball, which was definitely welcomed news for that coaching staff. Some quick notes in the preseason polls. Tennessee, not the number one team coming off their natty win, rather 5th in perfect game. That's 3rd in the SEC behind A&M, or 4th, I should say, behind A&M, LSU, and Georgia. You'll notice A&M pretty much the consensus number one team. They also lead the Baseball America top 25 preseason poll. Tennessee comes in at 3rd there, and all 3 teams are SEC teams. LSU 2nd. The D1 baseball preseason poll, the one pretty much everyone references unanimously, that Tennessee is 4th and 3rd in the SEC behind A&M and LSU. So a top 5 SEC team, Ryan, but not a team that is the consensus best team in the nation heading into this year.
Yeah, I think the A&M stuff's not overly surprising when you look at some of the bats they have back, and Pragner, who was like a 3rd round pick, I think, from the Angels, and then didn't end up signing and came back, and certainly he was great against Tennessee in Game 1 of the College World Series. So I thought A&M probably was the obvious number one team, just because of that, because of what they bring back, even though they have a new coach, who I guess was already on staff there. But yeah, no, I think it's probably a good thing for Tennessee. I mean, you see expectations high, but maybe not too high, maybe not overly high. And I know we'll get into this a little bit, comparing it entering 23 compared to this year. And obviously there are a lot of similarities. The one thing I would say, and I don't know if Tennessee, the start of the season, is going to be at 4th or 5th or whatever best team in the country. I know that year in 23, they were pretty consensus the number 2 team in the country behind LSU entering the year. Mm-hmm. And I know Tony Vitello would tell anybody that would listen that they were not the 2nd best team in the country before the season, and was really trying to temper expectations. This year, he hasn't been shouting to the masses that Tennessee's not as good as everybody thinks they are. So I think he would still tell you that. Yeah, exactly. I think he would still tell you that these rankings don't mean anything, and that they might not be the 5th best team in the country, but he's not going out of his way to tell everybody that. So, and there's other reasons why I think it's different from 2 years ago, but a team that's going to have a lot of hype, and for good reason, but not necessarily just like the for sure favorite in the nation or in the SEC entering the season.
Are you familiar with the Coach Speak Index on X, the account?
No, I haven't.
All right, it's very popular in the fantasy football.
Like a good one.
Yeah, it's very popular in the fantasy football betting community, because it basically will take quotes from NFL coaches primarily and apply them to this index they have, and how accurate these coaches typically are about what they're saying, right? Like Sean Payton's always been really bad. Sean McVay, pretty good. Like Sean McVay
Okay.
usually keeps it real. He's like, if you say something, he probably means it. Peyton is the absolute opposite. But and Pete Carroll, by the way, the worst, I think. Tony Vitello would have a high coach speak index score, I think. He keeps it real for the most part. And sometimes to a fault. But yeah, I think Tony is more honest than not when it comes to assessing his team, especially before the season starts, as Ryan mentioned. Looking at the SEC schedule, it's a tough one. Of course, 10 series make up the SEC season. Get the Gators, Texas A&M, in a national championship series rematch. Kentucky, Auburn, and Vanderbilt at home. But on the road, you got Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, LSU, and Arkansas to close out the regular season. So when you saw this SEC schedule, Ryan, just real quick, did you think it was more on the tougher side? And how do you, just your general thoughts on this SEC schedule, I guess?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like most SEC schedules in the sense that yeah, it is really hard. I don't think it's overly bad because I think you look at the away series and I think 3 of the 5 away series are very manageable. Well, Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. Not that they're going to be easy, but I don't think either of those 3 teams are going to be great this year. Now LSU and Arkansas are both going to be tough series on the road. So I thought it was fair. I didn't have a ton of thoughts. I guess my first handful of thoughts were, all right, it's kind of weird. No Texas and Oklahoma. I think they're the only team in the league, or of the other 14 teams in the league, that does not play one of the 2 new programs in a 3-game series. I think your eyes immediately go to that Texas A&M series at home, a rematch at a national championship. And obviously, like we were just talking about, A&M, the preseason #1 team, and the rankings were now at that point. I think we kind of all knew they were going to be in that spot. And then I think the last thing that stood out is just like, all right, you open it with Florida at home, and then back in the very back half you have LSU and then Arkansas in that very last series. So very difficult at the start, very difficult at the close, and then obviously a handful of big series sprinkled in the middle when you have Vanderbilt and A&M especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, the majority of the tough series are at home, which is good. I mean, we'll see what happens with Kentucky this year, but Vanderbilt's going to be solid. They're at home. Florida and A&M are in Knoxville, two of the final teams last year among the final teams. LSU and Arkansas, the toughest road series, but overall, I don't think the road schedule is just too daunting. But the schedule in itself is a tough one, as you mentioned, start and close, not the kindest. One last note before we get into the roster: the LNS renovations. There's been pictures circulating on social media, but it's obviously not done. If you haven't seen it, it's not really all that close to being done. Do you think that Lindsey Nelson Stadium renovations could be completed by the end of the season, or do you think this is something that's just going to be the whole, spanning the whole season?
Yeah, definitely spanning the whole season. Like probably working on it a lot next offseason to have it done for the 26th season. So, yeah, they are, to your point, they are going to continue to work on it. Like in the past, like last year, they didn't do anything during the season on the stadium. This year, they will continue to work on the stadium during the season. But no, do not anticipate any of it being done by the time a regional would come to town or the NCAA tournament gets going.
There you have it. All right, some injuries and absences to note before we get into the roster breakdown. Alex Perry stepped away from the program for personal reasons a little bit ago. He was in line to start at first base. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So Alex Perry not with the team at this moment. Came in as a JUCO guy last year, didn't contribute, all that consistently, regularly. Had some injury issues, but all the best wishes to Alex Perry and whatever he's dealing with. AJ Russell, one of the best players on Tennessee's roster, coming back from Tommy John. Obviously won't be ready to start the season as he had that surgery last June, right before Tennessee's College World Series run. But this is a recent quote from Tony Vitello. Said, "I think he's in line with what he should be. I made the comment a couple of times. By the halfway point, he'll be pitching for us. All of us would like that to be sooner, but there's some steps along the way to knock out." So a positive update from Tony V on AJ Russell. Potentially coming back to the halfway point of the season, which I think is, something none of us really expected given the timing of the surgery being in June, it usually takes, almost a full year for that stuff to come all the way back around. But, halfway through the season, that's looking at around April, early to mid-April, I guess would be halfway through the season, maybe even a little earlier than that. So this positive update from Vitello on AJ Russell, definitely a great thing for Tennessee.
For sure. And I think, after it happened, after he had that surgery, like the week the team left for Omaha, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was maybe a little bit late getting out there. But when they got in there, my understanding is the UCL was not fully torn. So it was Tommy John surgery, it was not the full Tommy John, I guess, which led to it being a shorter recovery time. And that's what they told him, after the fact. So, they kind of knew that it could be a little bit shortened. But even then, you never know with this type of thing, and you can have setbacks. And look, he's obviously not on the mound pitching right now. So hopefully there is no setbacks, but it's not like that's not impossible at this point either. So, I think kind of the date that I had heard was pretty early in the season. He could probably hopefully start throwing again. And then obviously from throwing to pitching to being worked up into pitching the game is anywhere from a 4 to 8 week process probably. So it's definitely gonna be something even before he gets on the mound. It's gonna be worth monitoring, and we're gonna be tracking early on. But a really good update from Tony last week. He's probably the X factor when you look at the pitching staff because of how talented he is. And what does he look like when he does get back? Is he the same guy we saw before the injury last year? And we saw that first weekend of the year in Texas last year. And then on the Alex Perry front, I would say I would slowly back up the comment you made of in the line to start. I would say was the favorite start. I wouldn't say he was a lock by any means. I didn't think so, at least. But he probably, to your point,
he was the consensus favorite. Yes,
he probably would have started opening day, and would have had a chance to win that job, and like the favorite. But I don't think he was just a lock to. I don't think he had it won or anything like that either.
Alex Perry was not a guy you look to for the season and be like, he's going to be one of Tennessee's best players or anything. It wasn't that case. It was just a position that had a ton of competition. And now, maybe that competition's all thwarted. And we'll get into that here in a second.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I'm going to go down a list for you guys. It's, like I said, a lot of new players, lot to take in. So I'm just going to give a rundown of some of the notable newcomers for Tennessee baseball this year. So when you look at the JUCO side of things, handful of arms that are going to contribute for Tennessee. Left-handed pitcher Brandon Arvidsson, he spent 24 with San Jacinto in Houston. He spent his freshman year at Texas A&M, didn't play. So he's a JUCO guy coming in, strong, hard-throwing lefty that Tennessee is going to rely on. And then 3 righties, Thomas Crabtree, Austin Breedlove, and Ryan Combs, brother of Aaron Combs. All 3 of those guys should see the mound quite a bit this year in a bullpen role, and could contribute in a potentially big way for Tennessee this season. The transfers, not a whole lot, but all are very key and all will have key roles this year. I just mentioned first base, Alberto Osuna from North Carolina. Definitely his strong suit is at the plate, and I'd say he's probably the favorite to start at first base for Tennessee now. He's been around the block. Walter State for 2 years, then went to UNC for 3. Was initially headed to D2 Power Tampa, but the whole Diego Pavia rule with the extra eligibility allowed him to come back and play college baseball at Tennessee for 1 more year. Infielders Gavin Killen and Andrew Fisher. Killen from Louisville, Andrew Fisher from Ole Miss. Fisher's teammate Liam Doyle also joined Tennessee this year. He's a lefty. If you remember, he shoved against Tennessee last year in Knoxville when Ole Miss played the Vols. So he's in line to be a weekend starter for Tennessee this year. Last notable transfer, righty Tanner Franklin from Kennesaw State will be a bullpen arm for Tennessee. Freshman, not going to go down the whole list. Obviously, there's a lot, but a couple of notable ones. Righty Tegan Coons, probably heard his name. He's potentially going to be a weekend starter for Tennessee this year. Catcher Levi Clark, who can also play some first base, probably will see him contribute. Outfielder / DH Jay Abernathy, really fast dude who will definitely have a role for Tennessee this year. And we'll get into some other of these guys, but those are the three you look to, I think, specifically Coons and Abernathy, Ryan, as freshmen who are definitely going to contribute potentially in a really major way for Tennessee this year.
Definitely, it's hard to see a world where at least a couple of those guys don't have a major impact. I mean, Coons is definitely going to be a big part of the staff. It just kind of depends on what the role is going to be. I think Jay Abernathy will end up being the starter in left field. I would be a little surprised if he's not. And then Levi Clark, I think it's a little bit more up in the air what his role looks like. But I think he's going to get at bats. I think he's going to be in the conversation at DH and probably getting some midweek action behind the plate too. So those are probably the three guys I would say I most circle was thinking will play this year. But I mean, we know the song and dance this first month of the season. Tennessee plays a lot of not very good opponents, and they play a lot of players. So a lot of these guys are going to get opportunities, and we'll see if any of them can take it and run with it.
Right. And we'll, any of these names come back up in our position breakdowns, Ryan, of these freshmen, feel free to throw them up. I know there's some others. Manny Marin, who's an infielder, and, Brennan Siegler, Chris Newstrom have had some moments here in winter workouts. There's a lot, and it's hard to see all these guys obviously contributing on a regular basis on weekends, but those are the three I feel are most likely, with two of them really being slam dunks. All right, let's get into the roster, starting with the pitching. So when you look at the weekend rotation, brand new slate, pretty much. It's going to be three new starters, no question about it. When you look at Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, these three arms, I think there's five guys that are in the mix here, Ryan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like there's a top five who can be weekend starters for Tennessee this season. That's made up of Liam Doyle, feels like a hammer. Tegan Coons, kind of the same deal. And then the three, little more up in the air. Dylan Loy, remember him obviously from last year, had a great true freshman season, especially down the stretch. Brandon Arvidsson, I mentioned the JUCO guy, and Nate Snead, arguably Tennessee's best arm, who is elite in a bullpen role last year. So Ryan, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Opening weekend against Hofstra in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. What is Tennessee's weekend rotation looking like?
Well, let me change the question. Let's do SEC opener against Florida. I just always like that more of what it ends up as. Liam Doyle to me is the no-brainer. What day? I mean, like last year we saw them use Drew Beam on Saturday. They like Drew Beam in that. Yeah. I tend to think like what Tony talked about with Drew Beam on Saturday was like a steady nature, and you know what you're going to get. I think Liam Doyle is more of a Friday guy because he's kind of got a little bit of a flair for the dramatic and has a big personality. So I think he would make more sense on Friday. He's their best pitcher. I mean, I watched him, I think it was 5 times in the fall. He pitched like, I want to say it was 8 or 10 innings, something like that. And he gave up like 2 hits, 1 run, 16, 17 strikeouts, something in that. That just was really just dominant when he threw, both against Tennessee's other players and in some of those exhibitions. I guess Western Kentucky would have been the exhibition he threw in down in Nashville. So I think he's the main guy. And then, I would lean towards Coons being the Saturday guy, and then Dylan Loy being the Sunday guy. Loy probably has a lower ceiling than Arvidsson, and I mean, any of those 5 guys you named, it would not shock me if they filled that role, or filled those roles. But Dylan Loy, it feels like they oftentimes have a guy like this, whether it's a Will Heflin or a Xander Sechrest, a guy that maybe isn't going to go 7 or 8 innings all the time, but a guy that's just really solid, a strike thrower, can typically get you through the lineup at least 2 times through and be pretty solid. It seems like they really value that. And as we've seen, they don't always just put their 3 best pitchers into the weekend starting opportunity. And Loy pitched in some big moments last year. He pitched in Omaha. He was great against LSU in the SEC Tournament Championship. So I'm all aboard the Dylan Loy train, and I think he ends up as one of Tennessee's weekend starters.
Yeah, just a really hyper-efficient dude. Not going to blow you away with the velo, but he's similar to Xander. He's a lefty, too. And he was nails in big moments, as Ryan mentioned. I think that's the best-case scenario for Tennessee, if Dylan Loy is the Sunday starter, because it allows you to keep Nate Snead and Arvidsson on a lesser scale in the pen. And Snead, we saw how versatile he can be, how he can throw multiple times in a weekend. He can come in for an inning and just blow guys away, or he can do extended relief. He's so versatile in what he can do out of the bullpen, and I think that is what Tennessee and Tony and Frank want more than anything, is to keep that weapon in the bullpen for multiple moments potentially in a weekend series.
I wonder, I guess to me, the X factor, because I completely agree. I think ideally Nate Snead stays in the bullpen. He excelled in that role. He did a bunch of different things in the bullpen for him last year. To me, what becomes interesting is, all right, you have Doyle, Loy, Arvidsson, all lefties, Coons and Snead right-handed. Do they feel the need to have one right-handed arm in the weekend rotation, to where if
Ooh,
things don't pan
yeah.
out for Coons or he struggles, do they feel like they need to go to Nate Snead? Do they feel like they need to have a right-handed arm? Because I mean, I really think, maybe Thomas Crabtree could become a the role I kind of just explained with Dylan Loy. Maybe he could do it, but like, to me, Coons and Snead are the right-handed arms that could possibly be starters. So if they're opposed to having three left-handed pitchers in the weekend rotation, and Coons does struggle, I think it almost forces Snead into that role. And look, I'm sure Snead would be good in that role. It's just more
Yeah.
about how you can maximize him. Very similarly to how they did last year, when he was, I think, definitely one of Tennessee's three best pitchers, at least for most of the season. He was one of Tennessee's three best pitchers, and never had at least never had a weekend start.
Yeah, I would say definitely, if not number one. I mean, Xander down the stretch was number one, but Snead has a case for number one, no doubt, from last season. So, yeah, you want to keep that in the pen as much as possible. But if things go awry with Loy or Coons, I think Snead is probably the guy you turn to, or maybe you go Arvidsson in the case Loy struggles, and then Snead is the back. He's just the ultimate contingency plan. I think he has such a high floor that if things go bad, you can always turn to him. He's kind of the backup plan, and he's probably Tennessee's best arm. But like we said, it just benefits Tennessee much more if he's able to stay in the pen. Okay, so we kind of talked about these five guys. I think we got a pretty good idea. Maybe a little bit more on Brandon Arvidsson here. He's just a little more of a rundown on him to familiarize our listeners. Like I said, JUCO guy, high velo, lefty. Anything else we should know about Arvidsson and just the type of pitcher he is?
Yeah, I feel like he's the guy I've watched the least of this bunch. I feel like I just missed him on the days that he pitched in the fall. But no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the main things. Big time out of junior college, very desired arm, I guess. I mean, Texas was really in the mix. I mean, it was kind of funny. Texas was really in the mix before they made the coaching change, and then Schlossnagle went there. And obviously, I don't think he was a big Schlossnagle fan from his time at A&M. And
Yeah,
then when
makes
Schlossnagle
sense.
left A&M became in the mix. So it kind of went from Tennessee and Texas to Tennessee and Texas A&M as his top contenders. But Tennessee ends up landing him. And yeah, I think just a really high ceiling type guy too, for this
Gotcha.
Tennessee team. I mean, it's a lot of these pitchers, you talk about high ceiling, high floor as to what you can see them doing. I think he's very much a high ceiling guy, which is why he's one of those guys I mentioned as a potential starter.
Looking at the bullpen, two of the five arms we mentioned will obviously be in the bullpen, and among Tennessee's top bullpen arms, if not the top two. I think if Dylan Loy ends up being a bullpen arm, you see him more as a bridge guy, high leverage guy in games. He's not, going to be a piggyback, I don't think. Maybe he would be, but I think he's a little bit more of a different role, maybe a Kirby role if he's coming out of the bullpen. But then you look at these other top bullpen arms. You mentioned Thomas Crabtree, Tanner Franklin, the Kennesaw State transfer I mentioned earlier, the other JUCO guys in Breedlove and Ryan Combs, and then the returners, who everyone knows, Andrew Binke and Marcus Phillips, who were fringe contributors last year in big moments, got bigger roles as the season went along. Um, you know, but I think there's a lot of high expectation out of Binke and Phillips this year. Phillips in late game spots, and Binke is a guy who can give a little more extended relief this year. What have you seen from this group of bullpen arms for Tennessee, and who's really stood out?
To your point, I mean, to me, the Lloyd, Binke, and Phillips are kind of that same group of guy. They were fringe roles, like they pitched sometimes in big spots last year, but not every weekend. And with everything Tennessee lost, those are the guys you turn to and say, "All right, you guys got to be good for Tennessee this year." And Lloyd's the one, as by the fact that we're talking about a potential starter, is the one that I have the most confidence in. To
Mhm.
me, it's just inconsistency has kind of been the conversation for Phillips and Binky this offseason. They've had a lot of good outings, but they've had some shaky outings too. I look at this point, Phillips pitched. They both pitched last night, but Phillips has pitched each of the last 2 Sundays, and has had 2 really good outings. Binky last night, Sunday the 2nd, I guess is when that would have been if you're listening to this, not the day it comes out. That was about as good as he's looked. I think he threw four innings, allowed 1 run, had 6 or 7 strikeouts. Like, that was as dominant as he's looked. So neither of those guys have done enough for me to just be like overly confident of like, all right, Phillips is the ninth inning guy, and all right, Binky is for sure going to be a multi-inning guy. And I think those are kind of the questions. Can Phillips be consistent enough? Because the skill set's obviously there with him. When it's on, I mean, it is fun to watch. And if he's
Yeah.
consistent, he's going to be a guy I think Tennessee's consistently going to want to turn to get 3 outs late in big games. Can he be consistent enough for them to be like, all right, this is the guy we trust, and not, all right, we've used a couple of our main guys already. Let's see what Phillips has in the tank today. And then can he be more than just a lefty specialist? I mean, that's kind of what he was last year. And that's what his floor is. I think in that sense, he has a high floor and that he's going to have a role. And you're going to put him in spots to get out of jams or put him in spots to face some lefties at the very least. But can he be a guy that you hand an inning to and you say, all right, pitch an inning or 2 here? Pitch. If you're pitching well, go through the lineup one time. To me, that's the question mark. That's where you want Binky to get to by the end of the season. And I think it's important too, because we mentioned it, especially for Binky. We mentioned it with the guys at the top of those 5 arms we think are potential starters. 3 of those are lefty. We think, at least I think, 2 of them probably end up being starters. So that leaves fewer lefty arms in the bullpen to be relied upon. And I think that adds to the significance of Binky being a main guy.
Yeah, and those 3 JUCO guys are all righties too. And Crabtree, Breedlove, and Combs. Arvidsson's a lefty, but the first 3 I mentioned there, all righty. So you're right. You look at Arvidsson, you look at Binky. There's not many lefties to look at here. Tanner Franklin's a righty too, right?
He is. Yep.
Transfer.
Tanner Franklin, very, very similar mold to Marcus Phillips in terms of skill set. Like a little tall guy, electric fastball, upper 90s, strike zone, command, that type of stuff being an inconsistency, a big issue for him at Kennesaw State. But he's been good. Like I have some confidence in him that he's going to be a good guy for Tennessee's bullpen, and it feels like he's gotten a lot better, and working with Frank Anderson's been really beneficial for him.
Yeah, just determining the pecking order here. Who do you think is more likely to contribute on a regular basis out of these JUCO guys? Like, which ones? I mean, it feels like Crabtree's the top one of these 3, not mentioning Arvidsson, with Crabtree, Breedlove, and Combs. Would you kind of put it in that order?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think Crabtree and Combs will both have roles. I feel pretty confident in that. Now, I think Crabtree, like, his role could be bigger. I see a path to his role being
More
a lot
upside.
bigger than I see. Yeah, Combs is. And I'll tell you what, Ryan Combs is a splitting image of his brother. When you watch like the wind up and everything, that is obviously very unique. He does not have the sweeper that Aaron had that was nasty and was obviously the final pitch in the SEC tournament championship and the final pitch in the national championship, but he has a really, really good changeup. And I just think he ends up having a role for Tennessee too. And that's not to say that Breedlove couldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if he does. I'm just a little bit less sure of what that role looks like. And to me, I feel like it's a little bit further down the pecking order. In terms of, I mean, we just talked about it with there not being a ton of lefty arms. There are a lot of right-handed arms that we think are going to be involved in this bullpen. And it just feels like he's a little bit further down. And where Combs, like, he has that changeup, I think will make him more effective against lefties to kind of be a right-handed, but almost could potentially be a little bit of a lefty specialist in those spots if some of those other guys don't pan out. I think he's a good strikeout guy to where, like, I see the path to, all right, it's hard. I think he, even in a small role, will have a role in this bullpen. I don't necessarily just see like how it fits for Breedlove, which isn't to say that it couldn't, isn't to say he couldn't be good enough to earn a role. to me, it's just like a little less clear what that would look like at this point in time.
Tate Strickland, Brandon Crinsell, a couple of freshmen we haven't mentioned. Both of those guys feel more like midweek guys at this moment.
Yeah, I would agree. Crinsell's a lefty, so probably a little bit more opportunity for him. And I know he's someone that the coaches are high on. And Strickland had a lot of good outings in the fall when I watched him. So they're in that range of Tennessee's trying to figure out a ton in their bullpen, and there's going to be opportunities. So it just wouldn't be like shocking if they earned a role. But to me, it's hard to think it's not going to be more than like that category of Binky, Loy, and Phillips we talked about last year. Where like, all right, maybe on a given weekend they need them, but it's hard to think to me that's going to be consistent. And given the fact that they're freshmen, I lean more towards thinking, like you said, probably midweek guys and guys you're going to see on Tuesday nights a lot this season.
Last two arms I want to mention, Luke Payne and Austin Hunley. Probably saw them on midweek games last year, but either of these two potentially in store for bigger roles or still kind of midweek guys in your opinion?
I could see Payne having a bigger role because, again, left-handed arm. He was a little.
Right.
She pitched on Sunday night, was a little bit shaky, finding the strike zone. Did end up getting out of a bases loaded jam, but he's had some good outings, and I think just purely from the left-handed aspect, it's like, all right, there's opportunity there, but would tend to think more midweek, and with Hundley, definitely think he'll be a midweek arm again this year.
There you have it. Let's get into the infield and the outfield here. We'll start with just kind of who we expect to be defensive starters, and then we'll get into more of the lineup and potential order, stuff like that. So let's just go position by position here. Start with catcher, a little bit more of an easier one. Cannon Peebles is back. Didn't end up becoming Tennessee's regularly starting catcher as we all expected last year, as Cal Stark took that role, given Peebles' struggles at the plate and Stark's really great defensive prowess. But Peebles expected starter here, but there's other guys who will see time, Stone Lawless being the main one here. And do you expect Cannon Peebles to be, every game of the weekend starter, or do you think Lawless will get a start pretty much every weekend?
Yeah, I think I lean towards thinking Lawless probably gets a start most weekends. To me, he's just been really good, and I think he's one of the favorites to be the starting DH when he's not behind the plate. So yeah, I lean more towards thinking he gets a start once a weekend. I do think it's worth noting as of right now that Peebles has not caught behind the plate in the last handful of scrimmages. A little bit of an
sore, right?
Yeah, sore arm is what Tony Vitello said when he met with the media last week. So I don't know. Obviously, we're sitting here 11 days out. Maybe he's good to go and fine to catch by the time they start the season. But that is at least worth noting at this point that he might be a little bit slow, hitting the ground run. He's been DHing and he's still been hitting. So I expect him to be in the lineup one way or another opening day, but just maybe a little slower behind the plate to get him back going.
That was my question. If Stone Lawless starts behind the plate, say on Saturdays regularly, do you think Cannon Peebles is the DH?
I would lean towards thinking so, but I mean, it's obviously just, it's a very simplistic take, but it's just going to depend on what the bat looks like. If he's hitting the ball well, he's going to be there. Look, to me, like he's in a lot of ways is the Blake Burke of last year, of entering the season, to where
interesting.
Certainly, I mean, I say all this and I should temper it. I don't expect Cannon Peebles to hit 360 with 24 home runs, but just in the sense that he was a guy that entered last season with a lot of hype. He'd had a year of production at North Carolina State, seemed like a surefire, had a good fall, hit the ball well, and then the season came around and did not have a very good season. The bat was not great. Now, obviously, Blake Burke never lost his job in 23 like Peebles did, but then we saw Peebles come around and was good in the DH spot for Tennessee down the stretch. He kind of ended up winning that job. It wasn't with a lot of fireworks, but he had a lot of good at-bats. The most overlooked at-bat of the season against Florida State in that ninth inning rally, that long at-bat that he had to walk that led to Tennessee being able to flip it over to the top of the order, and obviously 1 through 4 all got hits with 2 outs to secure that win. And then same thing. So he's kind of a little bit of a question mark. He's back. The talent's there. And then again, he had a great fall. Blake Burke had a great fall last year. And Cannon Peoples had a great fall. So I lean towards, while, yes, there is question marks about him because you want to see him do it more consistently during the game. I feel like he's going to have a good season, and he's going to be his bat's going to be a lot more like we expected it to be last season than it ended up being last season. Closer to what we saw at North Carolina State as a freshman.
Yeah, I think that's what we all expected, obviously, going into last year. He was in the cleanup spot opening day. I mean, Tennessee expected him to be one of its best bats, just didn't come to fruition. Stone Lawless, a redshirt freshman, was with the program last year, didn't see any time. But this is a guy who's got a lot of pop in his bat. But I'm interested, what have you seen from him defensively, going back to the fall and just so far here in January? Do you think he's, obviously he's capable enough defensively? Obviously, we know he is offensively to be really reliable.
I don't think he's just like elite behind the plate or any means, but he's not like a liability. Like, it's not like a Evan Russell situation where they taught him the position or something during the offseason, and it was trying to figure it out a lot as he went. He threw, I think it was Jackson Walker he caught stealing last night during the scrimmage, and he's had a number of those going back to the fall. So I don't, and it's not like Cannon Peoples is an elite defensive catcher or anything either. Right. So I don't expect, solid. I don't, and that's how I'd say Lawless is too. I don't expect it, or don't think it would be any sort of drop off defensively going from Peoples to Lawless.
Yeah, I guess that was more of my curiosity, if there was that drop off, if there was a lot of separation there, but doesn't seem like there is. Levi Clark, the other catcher, not really in the mix for a starting job, but could see midweek opportunities behind the plate. And as I mentioned earlier, Levi Clark's got a heck of a bat, and he's the true freshman there. So we'll move on to first base, and we'll bring back those two names, Lawless and Clark, because they get reps at first base too. I don't think either of us expect them to start there, but if in case of emergency, they could get in the mix here at first base. They are versatile in that way. But when you look at the first base spot, we talked about Alex Perry, stepping away from the program for personal reasons. That's opened the door for Dalton Bargo, we all thought, who hasn't really ever had a home at Tennessee, right? Like, he's contributed, he's a solid bat. He a great utility man, but he's just never had a position that he can say is his for an extended period of time at Tennessee. We thought maybe that was going to be the case now opening the season with first base, but then comes Alberto Osuna out of North Carolina, who feels like the favorite to start at first base now. Is that right, Ryan?
For sure. I mean, he still has to get eligible. He's not, at the time, 11 days out, has not been deemed eligible. But yeah, very unique situation. That is the expectation. Tennessee believes that'll happen. Just a really unique situation. And what no one's been able to explain to me. I've asked around to some Tennessee people, and no one's really had a great explanation. You said it. He played 2 seasons at Walter State, then 3 at North Carolina. He's out of eligibility. But he was somehow still had eligibility to play D2 baseball even before the Pavia ruling. He was going to be able to play D2. So that's what I cannot. I mean, it doesn't really matter now, but
maybe
I
there's different rules.
Around. Yeah, I mean, I guess
that's what
is.
I just figured. Yeah,
I just don't understand why there would be different rules, given it's both the NCAA.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, he was going to University of Tampa. They're defending D2 national champions. Tennessee had been talking to him. To me, I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then all of a sudden on Friday night was Tampa's season opener, and he was not in the lineup, which I think sent everything around. And then it comes out that he was coming to Tennessee. So, yes, if he's eligible, he's the guy at first base. I have a hard time thinking he wouldn't be. And, I mean, it's just one from the fact. I mean, it's the bat. That's why he's –
rates.
Yeah, he's a very good hitter. Hit 281, 17 doubles, 14 homers last year. He was a 3-year starter at North Carolina, hit 45 homers in those 3 seasons. And I say that to say, like, he's not – I don't think the reputation from what I've heard, is he's not a great defensive guy, but he is a first baseman. And Tennessee does not have a first baseman on their roster. Like, Alex Perry was not a first baseman. He was a middle infielder that they were teaching to play first base. Dalton Bargo, sure, he can play some first base, but he's, as Tony Vitello said last year, the Ben Zobrist. He's the ultimate utility man. So I think that there's probably just some comfort in the fact that even if Osuna's not great defensively, he is a first baseman, and he has 3 years of big-time college baseball experience playing that spot. Now, he did DH some in North Carolina too, but a lot of starts at first base as well. So To me, he's definitely the no-brainer. And look, once again, this has been a conversation for Tennessee a lot over the years. A lot of left-handed bats, and that's something I asked Tony Vitello about last week before the Osuna news. Like, does that affect how you talk about some of these competitions at DH or first base or left field? Trying to balance it out. Well, I think Osuna goes a long way in balancing that out with him being a right-handed bat.
Yeah. No, it's a good call because Bargo's obviously a lefty. So Osuna being a righty helps the balance there. And that's a note I wanted to get into a little bit later, but we can get into it now. Like, I don't think that's going to be a major storyline if we look at the starting lineup. Like, I think it's going to be pretty even, 4-5. Peebles is a switch, so if he's starting, it's 4-4-1.
Yep.
I think anyway, because the righties, Curley and Inslee are righties, they're going to start every day. If Backus wins the job in left, he's a righty. So if he's not, it will shift towards the lefty side of things. But I think that gives you 3 righties, which is not the worst thing in the world. Like, you have 3 righties who you expect to start every game, and Curley, Inslee, and Osuna. So I think that's fine enough. And if a lefty's throwing, then Peoples can hit from the right side. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I think 3, like you said, 3 when you have a switch hitter in there, is enough. That gives you. It's maybe not the most ideal, but it gives you enough balance to where you're not like, all right, you gotta game plan around it, or you gotta fill out the lineup card around it. I think that helps alleviate that concern a lot. And then DH, you're fully capable of maybe going with some righty lefty stuff if it is like a Bargo or a Stone Lawless. You have some flexibility there if Bargo's not in the lineup every day at first base.
Yeah, Lawless are righty too. So if he's
Exactly.
getting time at DH, there you go. Looking at the middle infield here, second base, Gavin Killen from Louisville, the transfer, favorite to start here. Dean Curley at shortstop, returning, going to be one of Tennessee's best players. I guess, Killen could play short, Curley could play second, but it feels like Killen at second, Curley at short, staying where he was last year, feels like the most likely scenario here. I know Killen played short at Louisville.
Yes, agree. Tony Vitello talked last week about that, infield positioning still being a question mark. So maybe we see some different stuff early in the season, and I'm gonna go ahead and move third base in this conversation too. Okay, Andrew Fisher, the Ole Miss transfer. To me, it's pretty simple. Last year, Andrew Fisher at Ole Miss, his glove struggled. He struggled defensively. He ended up the year at DH. Andrew Fisher is going to be the starting third baseman. He's going to get every single chance to hold that spot and to play third. If he is good enough to not lose that job, I think the rest of the infield becomes very simple. I think Curley's at short, Keelan is at second base, and you have all that figured out. Now, if Fisher's glove struggles enough where you want to move him from there and move him to DH, to me, that's when you just open up a whole can of worms. And I
feel like Bargo just goes to third.
So many possibilities. Maybe Bargo just goes to third. That's a possibility. I think they could move Dean Curley to third and Keelan to short, and then play either Ariel or Manny Marine at second base. I think you could play Ariel at third base and keep the rest of it the same. Like you said, you could play Bargo at third. You just have, to me, a ton of options if Fisher struggles defensively at third base and is moved to the DH spot. And I guess this is the time to bring up Manny Marine because I'm really high on him. At least in the long term, I think he's going to be a stud. But his bat's been really good. He is good defensively. I mean, he's a guy that worked some out in left field in the fall because that's obviously a little bit more of a position to grab. And I don't think he's going to be the guy there or anything. But I think that shows you what type of bat that he has and how he's impressed. They were kind of exploring options to, try to give him a more clear path to the field as a freshman. So again, I don't think if everything just goes according to plan, I don't think that ends up happening for him. But if you do have that third base spot come open, I think it opens up the possibility to where Marine could be in there, or Marin could be in there a little more frequently.
Do we know if it's Marine or Marin? Do we know?
So Sean Barros, the SID, he said, I think we're going to be calling him Marin. It's like technically something a little more like Marine, but not exactly Marine. It's got a little bit more, I guess, flair with it with the pronunciation. I don't know exactly what it is, but he said Manny told him, Sean Barros, I believe it was, he said Manny told him to just call him Marin. And that's not technically how it's pronounced. But that's usually how they just tell English speakers to pronounce it because it's us English speakers struggle to fully pronounce pronounce it.
So Marin or Marin.
Yeah, Marin, not Marin.
Okay.
Marin.
Yeah. Perfect. Manny Marin. Okay. Freshman infielder. So that's what it comes down to, I think, is that if Fisher's bad defensively, we know he's going to be DH. So that's taken care of. And then if left is taken by Abernathy, then Bargo really doesn't have a spot ever. I think he would end up being the third baseman in this spot. But like you're saying, Marin has a ton of upside offensively. So to maximize everything, if he's solid in the infield, you just slide Killen to short, Curley to third, who we know can play those positions well, I think, and
Yeah,
put Marin at second. That can maximize everything. If Bargo's struggling, which yeah, he's a great bat, but hey, he was cold for multiple stretches last year. And then of course, Ariel has never been a great bat. Maybe he can turn that around. If he does, then talk about maximizing things. Dude, Ariel's the best defender Tennessee's got. He's a wizard out there. So I just think it really comes down to who's doing well offensively, and if someone's just impossible to not put in the lineup, then that really changes things. It just depends on who's hot.
definitely. And I think the two other things I'd keep in mind, one with the Fisher situation, Billy Amick was not very good
Yeah, that's the
defensively
other
last
thing.
year.
I'm like, you
And
got to be
never pulled him.
really damn bad to be taken out,
Yeah.
given what we saw from Billy last year.
Yeah, exactly. So, and look, Fisher, not that he's just been great when I watched him, but there hasn't been like a lot of holy crap, there's no way this dude can play third base moments either. So
Okay.
I tend to think he probably holds on to it. The other one, and you said
Right.
it with Bargo, or you had you were kind of around it with Bargo. A take that I don't a take that I am monitoring would be the way to phrase it.
Okay.
I don't know this for sure. I don't feel this way for sure. A
I
monitoring
love that
take.
you preface it that way. You do that so much. You're like, okay, I have a take, but it's not a take yet. It's just like in the stages of becoming a take. I'm monitoring
Yes.
it. All right, let's hear it.
Bargo he had his 2 weeks where he started at third base last year when Billy had his appendectomy. Great.
Yeah.
Billy comes back. He's in the DH spot. He struggled. He could never seem to find a rhythm at DH. I wonder if he's one of those guys that just needs to be in the field, in the flow of the game, and he's not just a great bat when he's just off the bench. He's sitting on the bench all game, and then he comes in to hit. I wonder if he's again. It's just monitoring. To me, it was so stark the difference of what he was early season when he was getting starts at different spots, whether that be left field, right field. I guess probably wasn't third base a ton, but probably at least getting some run at third base. Hit great when he got those opportunities in SEC play when he was starting at third base, and then struggled down the stretch. I just wonder if that's the case, and certainly it is. We're going to have a good chance to monitor it because to me it feels like he's the most likely starter at DH to open the season.
Right. I would agree. And yeah, you're right. It was like, why would Tennessee go back to Amick at third? And that literally was the thought, because we knew Amick was a liability defensively and Bargo was just dynamite in both areas. Like, just put Billy at DH. I think we had that conversation a lot. And then, of course, Billy struggled a little bit offensively, really came to light. But yeah, maybe that's just the case for Bargo. And he's obviously a guy the coaching staff loves. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But yeah, in all likelihood, Fisher stays at third. Bargo's looking at DH, potentially left field, assuming Osuna is, all systems go there at first as well. Moving to the outfield, center and right, the easiest discussions of the day. Inslee and Chapman, right? No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, definitely. Inslee, you know who he is. Chapman, I think, is one of the main guys that you need to step up. And he's had some great moments over the offseason. To me, still a little more inconsistent than I'd like to see for a guy that is entering his third year, is super talented. It's like, all right, this is the year. Do you have a big season? But yeah, I mean, would be pretty shocking if Chapman's not the everyday starter in right field for Tennessee.
Left is where things get interesting. We mentioned how Bargo's in the discussion, as he pretty much is for any competition you have. But I think the two favorites here are Colby Backus, who's entering his third year at the program, spent 2 years at Walter State. So he's an older guy. He's got the tools defensively. He's a great base runner, super quick, but struggled at the plate last year in his limited opportunities. Just a high strikeout guy. And then there's Jay Abernathy, the freshman who everybody's pretty much high on. Talk about speed. This dude is super quick. Probably the fastest guy on the team, right? You'd say?
Definitely. Maybe the
Definitely.
fastest guy of Tony's tenure. I'd say it's
Faster than
him,
Seth?
Seth Stevens. I think
Yeah.
it's him, Seth, and Jay Charleston are right up there at the top in some order. I think he's just as fast as him.
So there's that, which could potentially, give him the nod for a leadoff spot. But when you look at Colby and Jay, these feel like the two candidates to start at left in your eyes. And I guess, is it more likely that Backus starts opening day and then Abernathy could take the job down the road? Or do you think Backus could have this, Jarrell Ortega type season where he's, been in the program a while and then finally can break through and contribute in a big way?
He certainly could. I mean, that wouldn't be my pick for what's going to happen, but it was, crazier things have happened. Jarrell Ortega would not have been my pick in 22 to have that type of season. And I mean,
Right.
it looked like Logan Steenstra was going to be a starter at second base over him. If we had recorded the podcast in 2022, which I guess 2022, you were still with Vol Country, so we weren't working together. If we had recorded a podcast 11 days before the season, I would have said Logan Steenstra was going to be the starter. I do bet Colby Backus starts on opening day. He's the veteran. He's the guy that's been in the program and is a great locker room guy, does everything the right way. And you typically see Tony
Reward those.
give some, reward those guys with, especially when it's a battle, like, all right, you're going to get the first shot at it. But yeah, certainly Jay Abernathy's going to get some starts opening weekend. He's going to get starts early in the season. And to me, I just think that's more likely of him being the guy. Now, he was a middle infielder in high school, so left field is a little bit new to him, but to me, I mean, he's done a great job. He got a ton of work there in the fall. Last night, he threw out a runner on a deep fly ball kind of down the line, probably just short of the warning track. He threw out a runner tagging up from second to third. I think it was, I want to say Chris Newstrom, someone that runs pretty well. So he just seems to have gotten a lot better there. You mentioned the speed. I think that just makes his floor really high too. And then I do think, I mean, Colby's got more power. So in that sense, his ceiling's higher. But we've just seen Colby, I don't know. To me, I feel more confident in Abernathy, like reaching middle of the road, like not a star, but like a solid hitter. Do you feel good about there in that role every day? Like I feel better about Abernathy reaching that than I do Backus. So
just a more consistent bat. I think that's fair. Colby was really boom or bust in his opportunities last year.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just feel solid about Abernathy. You hear people around the program, you hear Tony talk about him as like so cool, calm, and collected for a true freshman. Nothing really rattles him. I don't think the moment and playing in a big SEC type venues as a true freshman would really get to this guy. So he would be my pick there. I just have a hard time thinking it doesn't end up being him. But yeah, I mean, as I said to start this, much crazier things have happened.
There you have it. All right, let's get into the lineup. So let's remove Abernathy from the conversation just real quick because saying I just want to look at opening day here. So let's assume Colby starts in left. Let's assume Bargo gets the DH nod. Let's assume Asuna has eligibility and he's approved and all that and is starting at first. So just for fun, I kind of want to put guys into little groups here. Let's do like 3, 3, and 3 of who you think are more top of the order guys, more middle of the order guys, more back of the order guys. I feel like Inslee, Curley, Fisher, more top of the order guys. Where are you at with this little game we're playing here?
Yeah. This has the potential to get really hard to track because I can imagine my rambling will be bad here. I just feel like Inslee is in the 5 hole again. He was so good there last year. Like that's when he got hot. They put him there. He was great. So I kind of tend to like him in the 5 hole again. Curley, I would have said like the 3 hole.
Okay.
But now I'm going to put the conspiracy. I'm going to turn my hat to the side here, and we'll call it the conspiracy hat. Tony last week in his press conference was talking about hitting guys in spots they're not used to, spots that are maybe a little more uncomfortable to them. And me, numbers, matrix style.
Yeah, the Galifianakis.
I'm seeing, yes, Zach Galifianakis. So I don't think I said that was Hangover. I think not Matrix. So a little bit different movie
when he's counting cards. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. Curly hitting leadoff is what came to my head when he said that. That is
Figured
what
so.
that is what I thought. So that to say, I Deary, Curly and leadoff. I think Keelan is such a two-hitter.
Okay.
Like I think that's probably where he is. And then that, do you put a right-handed bat at the third spot, which would make me think Asuna if things are all systems a go, and then Fisher at 4, set it Inslee at 5, and then like Chapman at 6, Peebles at 7, Bargo 8, Abernathy or Colby 9. Like that's kind of me just spitballing it right here. That's kind
I think
of
that's fair.
how I could see it. I mean, we know Tony. There's nothing Tony loves more than alternating righty lefty in the lineup.
Oh, of course. He's sicko.
He is a
I mean,
sicko, and
it would just be like you had like every single game it was that way, no matter what. Like he would just switch KT somehow and be like, "What the hell? Why is KT in 6-hole?" No, yeah, you got to rotate. He didn't say that, but you knew that's why.
yes. Okay, so that lends to another question here, another conversation.
Wait, hold on, time out, just real quick.
Go ahead.
I want to go through what we just
take
said.
a 30.
All right, so we're talking about opening day here. By the way, I nailed the bottom 3, so round of applause. But in my little
well, I could be wrong. I'm not filling out the lineup card.
I know, but just I was trying to map this out like you would predict it. So I'll take a win here.
Yes, that's
so you think Curly could lead off to start the season, which Curly I think is probably the favorite to be Tennessee's best bat. I don't know if Fisher can rake, but like Curly's among Tennessee's best bats at least. So getting that guy the most ABs may be a good thing. We saw it with Simo last year, worked pretty well. Gavin Killen, second. Alberto Osuna, 3 as a righty. That's your top 3, righty, left, right. In the middle, Fisher, Inslee, and Chapman. I think that makes a lot of sense. Fisher in the cleanup spot, who's a guy who can hit a lot of bombs. Inslee and Chapman, the returners who feel really safe with. Definitely Inslee. And then the bottom, Peebles, Bargo, and Backus. I think Bargo and Backus definitely will be in that bottom 3 no matter what. And then, Peebles, depending on handedness of the opposing pitcher, could be shaken up a little bit, but feels about right with those 9. Okay, now back to what you were saying.
So with the lefty righty thing in mind, because we go through the way we just went through it, it worked out perfect with Backus in the lineup. I think the thing that it becomes a more interesting conversation is if Jay Abernathy is in the lineup, because then you have kind of a logjam of lefties at the back, and I think it, in some ways, and I mean I know obviously it flips over and it's not you don't just hit 1 through 9 one time in a game. It turns back over from 9 to 1. I almost think it, would behoove Tennessee from a pure stagger standpoint to have a lefty in the leadoff spot. And I guess, ideally Jay Abernathy's that guy. He's kind of your prototypical leadoff hitter. I don't know if Tennessee would want to put that target on his back as a true freshman. And Tony is anything but prototypical when it comes to the leadoff hitters and what he typically does. So I just say all that to be less of a take and more of just something that is a question mark to me. Because I almost like Abernathy in the 9-hole. You protect him a little bit there. You're not asking a ton of him. If he can get on, then you have somebody that's with incredible speed on the base pass for the top of your order, without putting quite the pressure on it. But I'm just also not sure, I think if that happens, you would need to have a left-handed bat in the leadoff spot to 1 through 9 stagger it. And I'm not really sure who that bat would be. I mean, I guess it's Keelan, but I kind of think he's, like I said, more of a 2-hitter.
I mean, he's the only one, right? Outside of Abernathy that you would put there, I think.
Yeah, I would say the one other guy who's not a true lefty would be Peebles, maybe, just with his skill set. He sees a lot of pitches, good contact hitter. But, yeah, I don't think he's, certainly that would be out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, Peebles can work great ABs. It just doesn't feel like he'd end up being a leadoff hitter. But you're right. It's probably the next closest one that makes sense. Like, you're not going to put Chap in the leadoff spot, right? You're not going to put...
No, definitely not.
So, yeah, he would be the most sensible one outside of Killen. But I think best case scenario, like you said, is Abernathy can become that guy and be a Seth Stevenson, a guy who could be pretty dang consistent at the plate, and who obviously once he gets to first, you can put him at third potentially. So, Tennessee really hasn't had a guy like that since Stevenson. Like last 2 years, they've had no good base stealers at all.
No,
Like it's been a terrible aspect of their game. Like they just can't do it. I think Blake
it is
Burke
not
led
a.
the season in base stealing for like
Yeah, he did.
3/4 of the year last
I
year.
think the whole season, did he not? It was him
I
and
think he
Curley.
may have got. I think Curley passed him in the end, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. But I could be wrong. But yeah, Burke was like the leader pretty much the whole season.
I'm not sure either got to double digits either. If they did,
No.
it was barely. But
No,
yeah, I mean
yeah.
that's just not something Tony. I mean,
Has
they prioritize power
emphasized.
hitting and
Yeah,
not
it makes
not
sense.
speed. But no, you're right. And I mean, it's you say since Seth Stevenson. I mean, really, it's been since Tony got his guys in there. There has not been much speed at all on the base pass. So yeah, that is a new aspect with Abernathy, and certainly will make it intriguing.
Burke did stay ahead of Curley 11-9.
Okay.
On stolen bases. They pretty dang efficient too. 11 of 13, 9 of 10. Simo's 5 of 9. By far the worst average. All right, let's get to. I think we pretty much, did a good job breaking all that down. Anybody we missed, Ryan, before I move on to like big picture stuff, like as far as players go, and just anybody else you want to emphasize as far as like, hey, expect this guy to really have a great offensive year. I know we talked about Osuna can rake, Fisher's a great bat, Curley killing. Like, I think we pretty much covered it all.
Yeah, I think any other points I want to make, I'll probably better make in this next section.
All right, let's go. Superlatives and predictions time. These are a little bit tougher questions to start, but I'm just curious. Is there a Dean Curley potentially on this roster? A freshman that maybe we barely mentioned? I think Manny Marin is probably the guy if there's anybody, but is there a Dean Curley potentially on this roster who could just kind of come out of nowhere and have a huge breakout season, everyday starter as a true freshman?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not Jay Abernathy, which he wouldn't from the sense of, coming out of nowhere, I think it, I think I'll go with it being Levi Clark.
Okay.
Because I think that could happen without injuries, without a bunch of things shaking things up. I think for Manny, you'd have to have some injuries or things shake it up. I could see a world where Levi Clark is a very consistent DH starter, and then just puts up big offensive numbers. I could see that happening.
Moving on to, is there a Hunter Inslee on this team? A 2023 Hunter Inslee, I should specify, as a guy who, hey, in that 23 season preview, we didn't mention Hunter Inslee. And then he started literally the second game of the year and ended up becoming the everyday center fielder. Is there a guy who, hey, we barely mentioned or didn't mention at all so far in this hour of recording that, could come out of nowhere and really have a surprising role?
I mean, I think it's probably Coley Backus. I mean, we talked about him, but that's
okay.
that's
Just the
the
guy
guy
who can really break out. You can, hit 290, 300 and be super dependable.
Yeah, a guy that we don't expect to be a starter, and or at least I don't expect to be a starter, and could be that. Like I think everything else, when you look at maybe the positions in the infield, there's a little bit of a question mark. But who it's going to be, I think, largely pretty set.
Yeah.
And I think you could say, I guess it would maybe be because the guy we haven't mentioned. I guess it would maybe be like Hunter High if we're going with that.
Yeah.
He's another guy who is versatile, so he could play at multiple spots in the outfield, particularly. I could see him getting some opportunities at left. If things don't pan out for Reese Chapman and he struggles, maybe Hunter High gets some opportunities there, and he becomes. I think he matches that steady mold a little bit more than Backus does, of just like high floor, maybe not the highest ceiling in the world. So from guys we haven't mentioned, again, I think it would be Hunter High, but there's a reason it's this category. I don't think it's going to happen. It's just outside prediction of a guy in the program who could possibly come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's very rare you have a 2023 Hunter Inslee, but I'm just trying to cover all bases here. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's your sleeper pick? I feel like it's probably one of the two you just mentioned, maybe Levi Clark, but who's your sleeper pick to contribute this year? More of a, actual superlative here.
Look, I'm going to say Stone Lawless.
It can be an arm too, by the way, but Stone Lawless, There we go.
Yeah, I think Stone Lawless, like we talked about him, but I just think generally speaking, most Tennessee baseball fans aren't super aware of Stone Lawless, don't really know who
Definitely.
he is, and I
Right.
think he could have a great year for Tennessee and be a bat that makes a big impact. I just think he's going to be he's in the mix at catcher, and I think he could earn more and more opportunities at DH too as the season goes along.
All right, most likely breakouts. I kind of dubbed this the Dylan Dreiling / Kavars Tier / Trey Lipscomb Award. A guy who can just really break out and be one of Tennessee's top players that, maybe is not a top 2-3 player in the consensus preseason, predictions, if you will, but like a true breakout player this year.
Yeah, I think I'll go one on the mound and one
All right.
one at the plate. I'll say Arvidsson on the mound. Kind of to what we said earlier of like, yeah, we know he's gonna have a role, but he's not one of the top guys. He's a relatively unfamiliar name, and I just think his ceiling is really high. Like I think he has a gear or some juice that not many Tennessee pitchers have. So in that sense, I think could definitely be a breakout. I like that. Maybe, true breakout since wasn't at the program yesterday. Program last year isn't quite fair because he's not a guy that's back. He's a newcomer, but he wasn't like some big time transfer newcomer either. It wasn't like Liam Doyle where everybody saw that and circled him.
Hey, no one's going to give you a hard time when literally the whole roster's new. All right. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. I do have a point on that I want to make too in a minute. And then at the plate, I'll say Cannon Peebles.
All right.
To me, it's Peebles or Chapman. Like those are the two guys that I would side towards, thinking they're the obvious candidates here. And maybe Bargo too, but Bargo between it's just like, where does he fit? That question mark. Chapman, I just haven't seen quite enough consistency from. Peebles, I'm, back to what I said earlier. Like he was good 2 falls ago. He started to hit a lot better towards the end of the year. He had another great fall. Like I just think Peebles is a guy that has a big year for Tennessee. And again, I don't think it maybe looks like it did for Dreiling and Tiers, where he hits 20+ home runs, but over 300 double-digit home runs, very, very solid for Tennessee. I think we see it with Peebles.
That's fair, and he did that at NC State. I think that would be great for Tennessee to finally have a really solid catcher, like complete catcher who can be consistent at the plate, hitting, offensively. It just hasn't really happened for Tennessee. We've been in the Cal Stark era the last 2 years, which is great at times, but can obviously not be great when you're trying to get guys on base and score. So I think Reese Chapman's probably this guy. When he came in with Dylan Dreiling, couple of lefties, same class, a lot of potential. It just hasn't manifested for Chapman yet, but I think he has all the tools, and I think he's talented enough for it to happen. Not saying you disagree with that, but he would be my pick for a breakout. And, from all the things I've seen from fellow writers and stuff last fall, early this season, it just feels like Chapman could be headed for that. So I'm going to say Reese Chapman's that guy. 15 home runs, just a really solid season. Okay, 3 quick hitters here. Most likely to lead this team in home runs. Who you got?
Andrew Fisher. To me, a no-brainer. I think he's going to hit 25+ bombs if Tennessee plays deep into the season.
There you go. Most likely to lead this team in batting average.
I'll go. This is a tougher one. I'll go Gavin Keelan.
Over Curley.
Over Curley. Curley's the other guy that I think it'll be one of those two. That's what stood out to me about Keelan this fall when I watched him a lot, is very rarely was there a day where I left thinking, man, what a day Gavin Keelan had today. That was just, wow, that was flashy. Like Andrew Fisher was flat. He'd hit a ball 450 feet. But you just kind of look back at it, and it's just like Keelan stacked good day after good day. Just a lot of hard hit singles up the middle, a lot of days with multiple hits, a lot of days of reaching base multiple times. And he does have some power. He hit home runs too. I've only been over there twice so far this winter, but he hit a home run in one of those days. But he's got it. He did it in the ACC last year, hit, I think, around 330, 340. And from what I've seen, I think we could see him do it again.
Most likely to lead this team in ERA among starting pitchers.
Yeah, I think it's Liam Doyle. I don't know. It's you have such the nature of like what you see, you lean on. To me, especially this is the case in baseball where there's less like you can see the basic stats, but there's less like advanced numbers. Whereas Ken Palm and basketball and some of these other sites,
Yeah.
like you can get into the weeds more on it in basketball. And it's like what we saw from Doyle was he pitched against Tennessee and he was great. He was unbelievable in the fall. And he had those numbers. He had that ERA that was a little more shaky last year, but I'll go with what my eyes have shown me the times I've watched him, and I'll say he's the top guy for Tennessee.
When we look back at the season, though, do you think we say Liam Doyle was Tennessee's best pitcher, or do you think that's Nate Snead?
I think it's Doyle.
Okay, wow. So you're expecting like a just dynamite season out of Liam Doyle, like just
I am.
he's the man.
Maybe
Nate Snead's the man, but Doyle's like,
yeah, and I say
that
that again, like not as a knock on Snead. I mean, I think we largely
no,
know what Snead is, which is really, really good. I just think Loyal
Doyle.
Liam Doyle
Yeah.
could have a special season.
X Factor. Who's this team's X Factor? You mentioned it just a tad, probably about like 40 minutes ago now, but who do you think is this team's X Factor in 2025?
Yeah, there's two of them. I'll start with the one that I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's just AJ Russell. Like we mentioned him at the top, but I mean, he's a guy that I think it was Jim Callis with the MLB Network, MLB.com was like, that dude could not pitch this year, and I think he would be worth a first-round pick. Like, that's how much talent there is there for AJ Russell. His numbers in his career when he's pitched are pretty unbelievable.
Unreal.
And the strikeout number, like he's just a game changer. Like, and I think he could serve in multiple roles. Like, everything goes perfect, he becomes that third starter, and all of a sudden, I think Tennessee has a killer rotation.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's something I definitely should have mentioned earlier, but I didn't get to it. Talking about the bullpen and AJ Russell, like if he comes back, I find it kind of hard to see him becoming a starter, right? I just think Tennessee would keep him in the pen.
Yeah, I think that's
when he comes back.
If everything is business as usual, everybody's humming along. Like
why would you change what's working?
Exactly. I agree with that. The one thing I would say, and it goes back to the conversation earlier of when we talk about starters, a lot of left-handed options, fewer right-handed options, and then you go to the bullpen, a ton of right-handed options, fewer left-handed options. I think you could, maybe expedite some of those concerns if you put Russell in a starting role. But again, like it's just a sense of like it feels like so many things have to happen for Russell into a starting role to make sense. Because when Russell comes back, he's going to be in the bullpen. He's not going to be worked up in the starter reps,
of course.
So he's going to be in a bullpen role to start, and then you would need him to be really good in that bullpen role, and probably really good, expanded a little bit in that bullpen role to be able to throw starting pitcher type number of pitches, and then I think you would need one of the starters to be struggling. And for it to matter of the point I just made, it would need to be one of the left-handers. And I just talked about Liam Doyle thinking he's going to be great. So I don't think it's going to be him. So it's like Loy or Arvidsson if either one of them has that spot. So to your point, it feels like so many different things would have to happen for AJ Russell to end up being a starter. But it's definitely possible. Crazier things have happened.
And obviously when everyone knows this, when you get into SEC tournament play, if you're in a regional and you're going 4 games, you need that fourth starter. So he can definitely be that if he's worked his way up enough, and he would start a game in Omaha almost certainly. Like, look, Loy started the SEC tournament championship. Like, you need guys to start. You need a fourth starter in these postseason tournaments. So that could certainly be Russell if he's healthy enough. To do so.
Good point.
Did you have another one? You said you had 2?
Yes. Yeah, Dalton Bargo.
Dalton Bargo.
In the lineup. Like, I just continue to think it's my brain is in a pretzel with this Dalton Bargo situation because I just think he's one of Tennessee's 9 best bats. Like, okay. I feel that way.
We said that last year, though.
Yeah, we did. And to that point, like, it's the same thing. It just doesn't feel like there's a clear fit. And look, I'd probably say Stone Wallace is one of Tennessee's 9 best bats too, and there's no clear fit for him. Like, or I mean, he's going to start Summit catcher, but he's not going to be the everyday guy there. So then you had the DH spot. So I don't know. I don't know what ends up happening with Bargo, but I think his ceiling is really high. And even though we're sitting here and I don't know where he fits into the plans, I don't know what happens. I have the suspicion that he's going to be a guy that has a really good season for Tennessee.
I mean, it's great for Bargo that he can, be this awesome utility guy and can save Tennessee in certain spots if there's injury. But it's also kind of unfortunate that he just doesn't have
Yeah.
a position to
Well,
lay claim to for 2 straight years, and he's as good of a player as he is.
yeah, no, it's like Tony Vitello said, he called him the Ben Zobrist last year. Being the Ben Zobrist is great in the MLB when you play 162 games and 6 games a week because people don't start every day. And you need someone that could it's great to be a guy that can start in different spots because you might be in there 4 days at 6 games a week at 3 different spots. In college, they play 60 games, I don't know, this is embarrassing.
Yeah, it just depends on how far
60,
you go,
70
but
games. Yeah.
yeah.
In the regular season, I guess it's like around 60 games. And when you really boil it down to what matters, you play 30 games. You play 30 SEC games, and that's what matters. And you play 3 of them a week. And if your guys are locked in, you're playing they're playing all 3 games every weekend. You're not subbing somebody in because they're tired or something on the weekend in SEC play, which to your point makes that versatility less desirable of a trait or less effective as a trait in college as it would be in professional baseball.
All right, last couple of things here before we get out of here. More big picture talk, not talking about any individuals here, but Ryan is the 2025 Tennessee Baseball Volunteers and Omaha team. And should that be the expectation coming off a national championship win?
I have such a hard time with this type of lane of conversation because I'm not going to actually do it, but if everybody wants to get my point fully across, turn up the volume on whatever you're listening to, maybe not all the way, but pretty high. Because I don't want to do this to everybody. If you don't want to have to deal with some yelling, but I do just want to yell, figuratively yell, getting to Omaha is really, really hard. And I think it's a super unfair expectation to put on a team that the expectation is to get to Omaha. Stephen A. Smith voice. However, Tony Vitello has raised the standards of this program so high that I think that if not the goal, for sure the goal, like it kind of is the expectation at this point. And that's not to say that if they don't make it to Omaha that they should get killed and it's like, oh, what a just disaster failure of a season. Like I don't think that's fair because of how hard it is to get to Omaha. But I think this team's really talented and I think they are certainly good enough to get back to Omaha. And when you've done it 3 of the last 4 years and the last 2 years, I think it's fair to say that's an expectation. As much as I kind of hate saying it's an expectation because I don't think that's fair to them. But the way they've raised the program, I guess it is a fair thing to say.
All right, let me ask you this though: in the mid to late 20 teens, and even obviously now, but like let's say 2015 through 2023 you're not a fan, you don't cover the team, but was your expectation for Ohio State football to make the 4-team college football playoff like every year? Like,
yeah,
you were like, hey, Ohio State will probably make it, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, they had 1 national championship in recent history. Like they won in 2002, right? But they won in 14. So coming off that natty, you expect them to be back. And 4-team college football playoff, it's very difficult to make. I mean, you got to win your conference championship, right? In that setting, like it's very, very tough to make. And making College World Series is probably harder just because of how many baseball teams there are and baseball, different sport. But, it's kind of the same thing. I think it has to be the expectation. As much as that sucks for the pressure on Tony and the players and everything and the fans being, impatient, that's just kind of the reality now. And 3 of the past 4 years, you made it. And the 1 year you didn't is the biggest crime that you didn't make it. Like, you made it in 23. Dude, the expectation every season is going to be to make Omaha. If that team made Omaha, it's going to be the expectation every year. And then you throw a natty on top of it all in 24. I just think that's how it's going to be until it's not. So, and that would probably take 8 years of just being, right on the edge or a little lackluster. Like that's just how it is for Tennessee baseball now. The expectation should never be, oh, if we don't win the natty, bust. I mean, I guess in a sense it can kind of be that way, but if you make it to Omaha, that's obviously a really successful season. And I just think that'll always be the expectation for Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably all accurate. They're probably, to the point you just said, they're probably 2 or 3 national championships shy of it being becoming national championship or
Yeah.
bust combo.
Yeah, they're not Bama football yet, right? They're not
Yeah,
Alabama football yet. They're Ohio State football in 2015. That's what they are.
yeah. No,
All
I
right.
think that's all accurate.
Speaking of that 23 team, just one quick question. The drop off was so stark early in that season, especially when SEC play came around. The sweep at Missouri, the worst weekend probably in the Vitello era, at least this decade. Do you think that could happen again for this Tennessee team? It feels like you talked about Tony having a higher opinion of this team. It seems it just feels like that's not going to happen with this team. It's the similar script. You lose a lot. There's obviously not the heartbreak of the season prior, so maybe that helps this team a little more. You're coming off a championship win, but it just feels like this team is not going to do that. They'll be higher floor offensively and a really strong pitching staff to boot.
Agree with all of that. I guess the thing we should add on too, 'cause we haven't said once, is like it's been hard for these defending national champion teams. They have not particularly done well the last 3 years. So that would be a point that would, point towards, all right, this could maybe be a 23 type thing. I lean towards thinking not, and it's kind of what you said. There's just so many more familiar faces at the plate. Whereas that team, you had like Christian Moore and Blake Burke, who had they were co-DHs. They did righty-lefty splits. So, one of those guys was in the lineup every day, but never both of them. And Jared Dickey, who obviously had a great season in 23, and injuries was kind of in and out of things in 22. You had those 3 guys were like the guys that were returning. To me, it feels like you just have so much more stability of where you have Dean Curley, who was in there every single day. You have Hunter Ensley, who was in there every single day. And then you have Cannon Peebles and Reese Chapman and Dalton Bargo, who were in there a number of days.
And he's starting.
Yeah, and Colby, who was in the fold some. And then I'm trying to think, looking back to it now too, like what in 23 they had Maui as a starter who had played some pretty high level college baseball as a transfer in. Am I missing anybody else really?
Zane.
And you had Zane, so you had those 2 guys. And look, Maui the Big 12. It's a good conference. It's not quite the same. I think you have a little bit more of that this year with Andrew Fisher and Ozuna, assuming he does get eligible. And I think all that just goes back to the point you said a minute ago, that the lineup's floor feels a whole lot higher than it did in 2023. Now, the pitching staff is not going to be as good. I mean, that pitching staff is incredible. You said it a minute ago.
Pitching average.
If 23 gets to Omaha, that's the expectation for everyone. That pitching staff largely carried into Omaha, and it was that pitching staff that struggled so badly early in SEC play that led to the collapse. But I think you have a lineup that can work through some pitching concerns or some pitching inconsistencies, and I think Tennessee has enough pitching where I'm not expecting it to be any sort of collapse or anything like that.
Yeah, last year's team, one of the best offensive teams ever. If you thought the 2022 team's records would never be beat, think again, because they literally got beat 2 years later by last year. So this team will not be as good offensively as last year, obviously. But do you think this pitching staff could be better than the pitching staff Tennessee had a year ago? Because if you remember, there was some real questions about that pitching staff with Kazi getting rocked back-to-back weeks. It's like, what is Tennessee gonna do? Russell's hurt. Kazi's getting shelled. Like, Xander's not dependable. At least he wasn't at that time. Like, what are we gonna do? It's kind of the thing. Do you think this pitching staff can be better than it was a year ago? Maybe not like postseason pitching from last year, but just throughout the whole season.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Like, yes, I think it will be better when you look at it over the course of the whole season. It's going to be less of a question mark because, like you said, things were so unconventional for Tennessee's pitching staff last year. So I expect them to be a lot more conventional and you to feel like roles are a little bit more secure. I do think there will be question marks about what some of those bullpen roles look like, who earned some of those bullpen roles. But when you take like Tennessee's top 5 or 6 pitchers going into this year, I think compared to last year, you have to feel a lot better about it this year. I guess if you remove AJ Russell from the fold, especially last year, which he essentially was 2 weeks into the season or 3 weeks into the season, whenever that first thing came up. So yes, all that I agree with. I think it's hard to project the postseason as much, just because, or what this pitching staff will look like compared to the pitching staff last year looked like in the postseason because they did find a way to piece so much of it together. And Aaron Combs got a lot better the back half of the season. Xander obviously you don't win a national championship without a guy like Xander kind of stepping up and doing what he did. But yeah, so I think when we're sitting here early SEC play, you're going to feel better about this pitching staff than you were a year ago.
Oh, there you have it. All right, one last thing. One bold prediction to close this epic season preview podcast with. Let's do one bold prediction for this 2025 team.
Tennessee makes it back to Omaha, and they go through a road super regional.
I like that. Okay.
I was going to say the PAPA 23. I don't think that. I do think they will host a regional.
Yeah.
But I think road, I'll say they're a 9-16 seed, and they go on the road the second weekend and get it done somewhere else to make it back to Omaha.
I like it. That's we haven't had that in a long time for Tennessee, right? Like, has that happened in the Tony era where they hosted a regional and then went on the road in the Supers?
No.
No, that'd be the first time.
Because they were, I think, four seed in 21, 1 seed in 22, 1 seed in 24. The 3 times they've been top 16 seeds, they've all been top 4 seeds.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Tennessee begins the season.
You got one? You gonna give me one?
Yeah, dude. Okay, look, here's the deal. I was gonna try to make one, but I'm like, what the hell? Like, come back to me after like literally the first series because I gotta learn some things about this dang team. Like, I mean, I obviously know enough. Like, I've done all this research, but I haven't watched these guys play, like you guys have. So I gotta see it with my own eyes a little bit before I'm like, oh, this guy will hit 20 homers. I'm just gonna pick something, just to do it. And I don't really feel comfortable doing that. I will say, how about this? Tennessee wins. Okay, I'm just looking at the schedule here. I don't know if this is even bold, but I'll say Tennessee wins every home series.
Okay, I don't think that's overly bold, but you probably get plus odds on it. If
definitely
Sportsbook was making it. So yeah, I think that's fair.
A&M Florida Vandy, like that's plus odds. Throw Kentucky in there.
Yeah.
I don't know what Auburn looks like, to be honest, but
I mean, Florida and A&M will. Those have been, you said it at the start, two teams that have been ranked above Tennessee in most of these preseason rankings, obviously A&M and all of them.
Yep. All right. Well, 11 days away, Chase Dolander days away from first pitch as we record this. Tennessee will begin the season at home this year, first time in a couple of years, against Hofstra in a 3-game series. They'll follow that up with the UNC Asheville midweeker against the Fighting Drew Pimbers on Tuesday, February 18th. They'll stay home for a little bit, too. They got a Sanford series, a North Alabama midweeker, and then first time they'll go on the road will actually be neutral site games over there at the Astros Foundation College Classic, which I believe Tennessee played in 22, right? It was the same thing
against Texas,
yes, and all that.
Yep, they played Texas, OU, and Baylor. And I guess a quick note on that, they got Oklahoma State. I'm not sure the order of the games. You got it pulled up.
Yeah.
Do you have it pulled up?
Yeah, Oklahoma State, Rice, and then Arizona.
Oklahoma State's like preseason top 15 team. Arizona is like in that 20 to 25 range. So both those games should be nice early season challenges for Tennessee.
All right. Well, that's Ryan Schumpert. You can follow him at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. You can follow me at Jack Foster Media. We'll be bringing you Tennessee baseball coverage all throughout the season. Also, if you're on Blue Sky, I haven't been like active on there, but I have an account and I plan on posting like the live update threads, all the good stuff on my Blue Sky account throughout the Tennessee baseball season. I'm going to turn my account like just into a Tennessee baseball thing. So if you're on Blue Sky, you can hit me up there. It's the same thing, Jack Foster Media. But be sure and follow at Rocky Top Insider on all platforms and stay up to date with all your Tennessee athletics coverage needs over at RockyTopInsider.com. But for Ryan, I'm Jack. We'll see you next time.